Let's hit the high road. Let's hit the high road. It's the first touch, strong connection. It lays deep in your soul. Feel the kindness strongly coming. 'Cause you can achieve your goal. Let's hit the high road.
Hey, it's Nancy Yeareld, and this is Nancy's Psychic View on the high road to humanity. And today I have Bill Wilson Quinn here. Bill, are you in Arizona?
No, I'm in California.
You're in California. Oh, okay. I'm in Arizona. I was hoping that you were in the same state as me. Welcome to the high
I
road.
was in the same state as you.
You
for many
were
years.
in the, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
I lived in the Phoenix area for 25 years.
Oh, get out. Well, I'm up in
Yeah.
Payson. I'm up in
Yes,
Payson. I'm up in the hills.
I
Well,
remember we had some email
yeah,
conversation.
we talked about this. We talked about this.
Exactly.
That's right. That's right. Thank you for refreshing my memory. Well, welcome to the show. I'm really glad
Thank
you're
you.
here today. Yeah.
Thank you.
You guys, he's written this book. It's called The Higher Spiritual Path. And if you're watching me on my YouTube channel, I'm holding it up right now. And he goes by Wilson Quinn on the book. We're going to be talking about 12 essays he's written on ascending to your higher spiritual path. And we're all trying to ascend right now. And I just have to say, this is High Road to Humanity. And so I pulled up the news because I always like to, bring in current events. And I have to tell you, the current events, the news is so depressing that I didn't pull anything to talk about today. I mean, it's not even worth spending our time on it. That's where we've gotten to. I just want to say that. I really feel that, humanity's we're at a point where people either wake up and they learn this stuff, right? And hopefully they connect with the divine, or we lose. What do you think? I think we're going to win. What do you think?
I think your analysis is absolutely right.
Thank
There is a lot of darkness afoot on our planet right now,
Yeah.
and it seems to be getting darker
Yeah.
as we progress in terms of the environment, in terms of repressive autocratic political systems, in terms of the inversion of values,
Right.
of principles that we have, where
Yep.
now, unfortunately, it seems that justice yields to injustice,
Yeah.
good yields to evil, and this sort of thing, and good stewardship of the earth now yields to exploitation, and has for some time. And it doesn't seem to. We haven't hit bottom yet, I'm afraid.
Yeah,
It
I'm
seems
with
like
you.
it's getting worse. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
So it is a
almost like,
perfect time to start to investigate how we can individually uh, bring our energies to reversing these trends by
yeah.
the spirituality, right?
No, I agree with you. I mean, I didn't mean to get off on a little tangent there, but I'll tell you what, you start to look, it's 11:11 on my clock right now. So when you look at this stuff, I mean, I just want to say, TSA director arrested for US Custom and Border Protection in Florida. People aren't doing their jobs. You get into the lady from who was the president of the university, Harvard, and here she wasn't doing her job and she was plagiarizing. And the truth, here's what I see. We'll get into all of this in your book, but I mean, I just see the truth is starting to come out and people are starting to see this stuff. I mean, we're not blind. People aren't stupid. Here's the thing. Here's what I think. I think there's always been this stuff that's gone on behind the scenes, but now because so many of us are raising the consciousness, I think that a lot of this stuff is coming to light.
Well, I think perhaps that's true. I think, though, that there are some substantive forces, in on our planet, in fact, in the universe, and they tend to go in cycles.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we're in a cycle now where, in fact, the Hindus refer to it as the Kali Yuga, the sort of a cycle of darkness and getting back to the sort of more animal propensities of the human condition.
Mhm.
And then at some point, the cycle swings and starts, the arc starts heading back upward. And so, you know, there are always struggles at these points, of these specific points in these cycles,
Mhm.
where, you know, the time is more and more ripe to wake up and see the inversion of values that's going on,
Oh,
and then
yeah.
try to do something about it
Yeah.
and the best way to do something about it is to undertake a course of spirituality that's wedded to the truth. And once you start doing that and start reading and investigating and meditating and all the other elements of spiritual activity that people undertake, the better off we get collectively, because the each person by himself or herself is not going to be able to swing this
Right.
version of changes, but collectively, if
Right.
enough positive energy is directed toward the issue, then it does start to change.
See, and I feel that it is. I really do. And I should read your bio. He's got a really long bio, you guys. William Wilson Quinn is an alumnus of the University of Arizona. He got a BA in 1970 in literature and writing. In 78, he earned a degree in MA in religious studies from the University of Chicago's Divinity School. I mean, he has such, this is like, wow. From 82 to 87, you work for the Bureau of Indian Affairs, applying his graduate training in tribal religion. I think that's really cool. I worked with the Native Americans in New Mexico, and that's really interesting stuff. For the last, yeah, you worked as in the legal here in Phoenix in the office there. You were in the Department of the Interior. You've written 3 books. I mean, you've got quite the background. I'm just wanting to know what possessed you to put this together. You know, you say this book is based on sacred science and spiritual science. I like that. I like
Yeah,
that.
right.
So what?
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, it does stem from my earlier training at when I was working for the Theosophical Society
Okay.
in the national headquarters in Illinois.
Okay.
I sort of was led into that by my studies of Eastern religion at the University of Arizona,
Okay.
and you know, the Vedanta and the Upanishads that I read, and also the Buddhist sutras and so forth. And then I started to write for their journal, and I was invited to come work there as assistant editor of their monthly magazine. And so when I graduated from Arizona, I did that. And that was also another learning area for me. And in that place, you know, one studies the theosophical doctrine, which is not new. In
Right.
fact, it is the most ancient doctrine in the world. And you can trace this doctrine and its various manifestations all throughout recorded history, and starting with the Egyptians, and you know, the early Chinese with Lao Tzu and the Tao Te Ching and Confucius, and then right up through Western civilization with Pythagoras and Plato and Socrates, and then later on Plotinus, and the flowerings of all of these sort of theosophical or perennial philosophy movements. It's all linked together. It's all one long chain.
Right.
And the latest manifestation of that, or the most profound and detailed manifestation was the writings of H.P. Blavatsky in the 1880s, from 1875 to her death in around 1891.
And what did she say that's so profound?
Well, she wrote the Secret Doctrine, which is a 2-volume massive work on cosmogenesis, sort of starting back with the continuous Big Bang theories of the creation of the universe, and all of the energies that are released in that process, and the development of globes and chains and galaxies and also that, and then the appearance of humanity from the whole process of evolution through the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, and then up to the human being.
Well,
And
wait,
so,
what about God? What about the creator? Is that in there somewhere?
oh, absolutely.
Okay.
The
I want to
perennial
make sure.
philosophy, yeah. The perennial philosophy does not view the creator as a being. Okay,
How
it is
did, and it
not
create it as an energy,
right.
as an energy.
Yes, it is
Yeah.
in fact the universal cosmic intelligence,
Right,
right?
right.
Because the intelligence, the Sanskrit word for that is mahat. The Sanskrit word for mind is manas. So those are all the root Sanskrit terms.
Right, right.
The cosmic intelligence, whereby everything that lives, in fact, everything altogether has a form of its own consciousness. And as the organisms evolve and get more sophisticated, that consciousness expands, so that the human being is now the pinnacle. It's the so-called apex of consciousness in all life.
Right.
We have, as human beings, the ability to look in ourselves and understand that we have self-consciousness, and furthermore, that consciousness is a gateway to liberation
Right.
from the wheel of death and rebirth
Mhm.
that we are all bound to until we are released. And
Right.
in the Eastern terms, that release in Buddhism is called nirvana. In Hinduism, it's called moksha, where you are no longer bound to the wheel of death and rebirth, you see.
When you don't have to reincarnate anymore.
Exactly right.
Yeah, I
Exactly.
think that's where I'm at, man.
Yeah.
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 I'm with you. I mean, I'm like, because what we do down here matters. I always say this all the time. And I love your analogy. I want to get back to your book a little bit. I love talking to you because you really get this stuff. And it's cool to talk to somebody that's so knowledgeable. You talk about a mountain, and you talk about the summit. You talk about Mount Everest in your book. And you use that analogy as people are ascending, as they're learning, and you call it a higher spiritual path. And I think it's really interesting that you do this. You say ascending to the summit of an actual mountain correlates to the ascent of the summit of spiritual truth and the rigorous high path that must be tread to achieve this. And this is not an easy thing to do.
No, it is quite difficult and quite
Yeah.
rigorous.
And that's why I
Right.
kind of went back to, I mean, that's how you start your book out. I just want to come back to that. I mean, that's what you're talking about here in this
Right.
book. Yeah.
Right. Well, there, in Buddhism, first of all, the whole mountain and summit, it is a metaphor.
Right. Right.
But it's a metaphor that's been used since time immemorial. If you look back, all of these great mountains, Moses came down from Mount Sinai with his tablets from the mountaintop, and there's the great Mount Meru in Hinduism, and in the Western culture, there's a Mount Olympus, the home of the gods. So there's the summits and mountains have always been associated with the higher consciousness, a place where heaven and earth meet in a sense. That point, it's the sacred points of these mountaintops.
Right.
And to get there, you start out with the notion that the Buddha really got it pretty accurately right when he announced his Four Noble Truths, sitting after enlightenment under the Bodhi tree in North India. He said that life essentially down here is fundamentally suffering. It's not that there's some joy in it, not that, we're not without joy or pleasure or these high points, but when you take the whole process, and let me tell you from my standpoint, relative to aging and approaching death, it gets tougher. Right?
Yeah.
Well,
I don't know. No, wait a minute.
The suffering is it's sort of, it gets accelerated, but he said that's okay, because there's a way out of this. The suffering is caused by your attachments to everything around you, including your emotional attachments.
Right.
And as long as if you can break those attachments and be free of them, then you will eventually see the path out of the suffering. And then finally, his fourth noble truth is, he outlines it in his fourth noble truth, which is the eightfold path: right living, right consciousness, right meditation, right thought, all of these things. If you follow that pathway, then you will eventually reach a point where you're no longer bound to this wheel of death and rebirth, and you escape finally suffering for all time. So the release from the
it's worth it.
It is
It's
worth it,
worth
but it ain't easy.
No,
Okay?
and I gotta tell
nobody's-
you, oh my gosh, as you're talking, I have to stop you a minute. As you're talking, I mean, you're talking to somebody who's just gone through this.
Yeah.
And it's, and I can tell you have too. And it's not, you think as you get older, I just want to throw this out here. You do get wiser. You do get wiser and you start to know more and you start to work on yourself and know these things. But you're absolutely right. It doesn't get easier. It gets
No.
harder because we don't have that much more time. So we
Right.
got to get it in and do what we're going to do down here so that when we leave our bodies, that we don't have to reincarnate again.
Right.
Because, and that's another thing. And how do you know? I mean, I know you don't know everything, but I want to know what you think. Like, I don't want to do this again. That's why I work so hard on myself and I try to help humanity and do everything I can. But like when we leave our bodies, if we don't want to go this way, I mean, does it say somewhere in the Bhagavad Gita that we can go this way so we don't have to come back and reincarnate? Have you read anything about that?
Well, yes.
Let's talk about that.
There are a number of options, in fact.
Yes, let's talk about the options.
Okay, the options are, in the first case, if one is heading toward release from the wheel of death and rebirth, moksha, or nirvana. And I'm sorry I keep using the Sanskrit terms, but we don't have it in English.
No,
So
I
those
get
are
it.
handy terms, right?
I get
So
it.
we use those.
I think the
terms,
audience understands.
right.
Yeah.
And it's not only for Buddhists and not only for Hindus, it's for everybody.
It's for everybody. Yeah, yeah.
Released from the wheel of death and rebirth. Okay.
Right.
In Buddhism, and I go back to that because they have dialogue about this. These
See,
issues.
I need to read this. I'm so glad you're on the show today.
Yeah. You can, there's a path that they call it the Pratyekya Buddha, that you don't come back anymore, or you go straight into nirvana from your last incarnation. Okay. You go straight in there. If you
go
reach
with
that
God?
level.
Do you go with
What?
the divine, like into the
You go
divine light?
you reintegrate with
With
that,
the divine.
with
Right.
the divine. Exactly. You reintegrate because there's an element in you that's already there, that the atma, the spirit within all of us,
Yeah.
that reintegrates. Okay.
Right.
So once you've achieved this, after the balancing of all of your karmas, the karma of all of your incarnations, you reach a point where you're eligible for release, right? So you do that. That's one option, to go straight into nirvana. The other option on that side of the ledger, on the nirvana side of the ledger, is to defer entering into nirvana, to come back to assist everyone else who's left here to seek and to reach enlightenment. And that's called the path of the bodhisattva. That's a path of, they refer to it as the path of woe. But this is a person now who has been released from the wheel of death and rebirth, but yet voluntarily renounces nirvana to come back into a body, or into at least a state of being that isn't in nirvana, to assist other people in seeing the truth of the release from the wheel of death and rebirth. So that's called the bodhisattva. So you've got these two choices, Pratyekya Buddha or bodhisattva. Okay. So that's on the positive side of the ledger. On the negative side of the ledger is a state of consciousness or being called vici.
Okay.
And that is for people who lead a path of untruth, deceit, cruelty, selfishness, all of those aspects of character that are on the negative side of the ledger. And once a person, there's a tendency in the reincarnating process to stay with those courses once they've been developed in your earlier lives. It's sort of, it's like a tendency. It's not, you're not condemned to it. You can get out of it, but it gets harder and harder as you follow that path. So, I'm thinking of the movie Star Wars, let's say, and you've got Darth Vader and his boss, right? I don't remember what the characters are called in the movie, but this is a seriously evil person, right? Who wields a lot of power, and usually it's about leveraging other people and ruling through fear and intimidation and so forth. So that's another path. I prefer not to discuss that or go into it in any great length, because it doesn't have a lot to do with my book or what I believe that most of us who are genuinely interested in higher spiritual development are interested in. So the two options then are go straight into nirvana or renounce it as part of the bodhisattva path and then come back and help others. And let me add something very quickly here.
Sure.
I don't want to dominate the conversation.
No, I'm so interested in this. Thank you. I know the audience is.
There is this group of those who have renounced nirvana for the sake of others, for the sake of their fellow human beings, so that they can achieve enlightenment. And they are generally referred to as adepts, or sometimes mahatmas or masters, or and these are people who don't go into the public. They're not interested in wealth or fame or any of that.
Right.
They tend to stay behind the scenes, and that raises a lot of suspicions with people. They say, well, if they're so glamorous or they're so powerful, why aren't they? And that's the simple answer to that is they can't do their work effectively if they're always in the spotlight. That's the answer to that.
I love
and
it.
So they remain sort of incognito, but they are there, and they take pupils. Of certain groups of them do, or certain individuals. So these are the adepts to which I refer in the book. And again, going back to that whole line or that chain of the perennial philosophy from proto-history to the present, they are mentioned throughout those times. This organization, this order of these people who have achieved nirvana, but have not, but have forsworn entry into nirvana.
Well, and I'm just going to expand upon this a little bit since we're talking about it. And I'm so glad you talk about this, because I've asked different people, and you've had the best answer of anybody on that's come on my show about what happens. But I do believe there are a lot of angelic beings and elementals in human bodies right now as well. Because I know for sure there's a lot of angels that are in human bodies right now, and a lot of, like I said, fairies, and it may sound a little out there, but they are here doing the same thing that you're talking about. There is a lot of help being done here on the earth plane, and people, I don't think, realize it. You don't have to address it, but I just know for sure.
Well, I can address it if you wish.
Sure, go ahead.
The Theosophical doctrine does acknowledge the presence of angelic forces. In Sanskrit, they're called devas. And they are in the Theosophical doctrine, or the perennial philosophy, they are sort of vortices of positive energy. To my knowledge, I don't know of any occasions where a deva has actually entered the physical body of a person. And that may or may not happen. I can't address that because I don't know the answer to that question. But I do know that there are devas, there are elementals, and there are all these other denizens of what we've referred to as the inner planes. Those are the planes that modern science has not quite yet breached. They may at some point, but these are all electromagnetic, energetic fields of very high frequency.
Right.
And So we don't have any instruments today in the modern scientific community that can pierce that and get into understand these. But clairvoyants see them certainly, and others that are attuned to those energies see them and feel them.
Right.
And so, yeah, the world is populated with all these types of entities.
Which is cool because it brings up the vibration, and that helps bring the vibration up of everybody else. Just the presence of a high vibration.
Yeah,
Just
right.
you going to the store or me going to the store, when our vibration is very high like that, we affect everybody else. And I think that's why they're all here. All right, I want to talk about free will. You talk about, he has so many cool things in this book, you guys. Well, and you even talk about inner strength, and I'll have to go back to that. But free will, you say will is that which governs the manifestor's universe in eternity. That kind of struck it. I was like, what does he mean by that? You say will is the one and sole principle of attracting eternal motion. Can you expand so I understand this? What are you talking
Right.
about?
That sounds a little bit like a quote from Blavatsky.
Yeah, it's one of the quotes that I pulled out of the
Yeah.
book, but I didn't understand. I was like, well, what does this
Yeah.
mean as far as manifesting in eternity? I know we manifest immediately in eternity, whereas here we manifest differently.
Okay. Yeah, you're going to get now involved in a rather profound metaphysical discussion if you
That's
want
fine.
to talk,
Go for it.
but we have to talk about the appearance and dissolution of the periodic appearance and disappearance of the universe. Okay. And in Sanskrit, and this is all laid out in the Vedas and the Vedanta in very stark detail.
Okay.
What you have is before the universe recreates itself, it retracts into a state of the Sanskrit called pralaya, where there's nothing material in there. It is a state of pure latency, right? And then it starts to sort of dawn like when a seed starts to sprout under the earth. There's a motion in it.
It festers.
There's the first breath, and then it manifests, and the manifestation process is step by step, and it expands outward. And in that process, not only do we have the material elements of the cosmos and all the chemical elements that compose the material aspects of the cosmos, of the universe, but we have these various energies, one of which is will. All right. There are other ones too. They refer to the Vedantic writings refer to these forces. One of them is akasha, which is a sort of a life energy and sound. Another one is called fohat. Another, you may have heard of this, prana. There's prana is like electricity in the world. And so there are all these different forces, and among them is will. And that is a sort of uncreated
energy.
force.
Is it an energy? The energy?
Well, it is an energy.
If I have will, you have will.
Yeah, we all have will. Everything has will.
So it's energy.
Will, yeah, it stepped down from the highest cosmos, just like universal intelligence.
Right.
There's one omniscient universal intelligence, but as you get lower into the various the levels of life and being, down to the amoeba, and then finally up into the human being, all of those things have will.
Okay.
In some
to keep it going, progressing.
But the interesting thing about will is that when it reaches the human being, we have the ability to use it more than any of the other creatures on Earth, the human beings. Okay. So from that point of latency and expansion of manifestation of the universe in all of its various stages, downward stages, it lands and then manifests in the human being, where we are and then enabled to use it. And HPB also said, Blavatsky also said that nothing is impossible to he or her who wills.
That's right.
So when she says nothing is impossible, she means nothing is impossible. So the will is such a powerful energy and such a powerful force that those adepts that we referred to have perfected that to a science, the development of that, and use that in their energies to bring enlightenment to humanity. But they have certain rules about it. They don't use it against people. They don't force anyone. They only offer the truth to people to see, right?
Mhm.
It's up to us to recognize the truth in those writings. And they've left a trail of writings, all the going back, as I said, to the Egyptians and the Sumerians even, and the
Right.
Chinese, and all the way through to the modern world. So we have it within ourselves to utilize that will, but it's never utilized the best unless it's free will. And what we mean by free will is where a person who is a spiritual aspirant is able to align his or her will with that universal will. Then that becomes one will, which is really free will. Because if you are subject to your will, which wants to take you into bad places, then
Yeah.
you're a prisoner of that will. You do not have
Right.
free will,
Right.
even
I'm
though
going to
you have
stop you.
choices.
I
Yeah.
want to stop you. I
Right.
feel like, because as you're saying this, I'm realizing, okay, so what I feel like it's the will is connecting with God, with the universe, with that energy, the creative energy, which the way God set this up, the way the creator set up the universe is such that the universe picks up our energy, picks up our emotions and everything like that. So the universe, which is God, which is the creator, picks up my will or your will, and we can connect with that universal energy. And so the will becomes one. That's what you're saying,
Yes.
correct? Yeah.
Yeah, in a sense, except I
Yeah.
would sort of flip it and say that
What?
we are that will.
We
We
are?
are that will. It's a matter of us to come to recognize that.
Yes, but what I'm saying is once you connect with, I say God, universal
Right.
energy. Once you connect with that love, with that power, what I'm trying to say to you is I believe, and I think it's what you just said a minute ago, when you connect with that, it's like it makes it so much stronger. And as long as it's free will, then you're good to go.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Except it's not our little individual proprietary will that
It's
we're using to connect with it. The divine will is already within us. All we
right.
need to do is recognize that fact, and that is the process of connection.
Okay,
To
you're okay.
recognize that
I
it's
see what
within
you're
us.
saying. I see.
Right,
Right. Okay. I
yeah.
see what you're saying. Okay. I'm making it more than it needs to be. I got it. I got it. What a great book. There's such cool things in here. There's another chapter where you talk about intuition. I mean, there's so much in here. We've been on for a while, but what has been the response? I mean, when did this come out? When was it?
This was released in the United States last week.
Oh my gosh. So
Yeah, so
have you gotten
January
any
1st or
response,
January
or
2nd. Huh?
have you gotten any feedback yet, or is it
Well,
still too
I haven't
early?
gotten. Yeah. So I think it's too early. I haven't gotten any feedback yet, although I have done some of these types of interviews
Interview.
and so forth. So
Yeah.
it's sort of floating out there in the world, but we'll see what happens. We'll see.
You
Yeah.
are so, Bill, you are so knowledgeable. I mean, you just know a lot, and you're just one of the most knowledgeable people. I've interviewed a lot of people. I think I've done over 400 interviews, and you just know so much, and you have the information. It's like you have the spiritual and the scientific within you. You really do, to back it up. What would you like to leave the audience with? Something that would help people, help humanity right now. What could you give us?
Well, aside from this is a good segue for me to plug
Little
my book.
piece, little piece.
Yeah, yeah. Not only read my book, but I think maybe start reading as much as you can about the perennial philosophy, because the perennial philosophy in the latest large iteration of it that is referred to as theosophy. Okay.
Mhm.
But theosophy is just a restatement. It's not just, it's an amazingly wonderful restatement in modern English this ancient trend of spirituality. So I would say for anybody who really wants to get to the truth, start to see that unbroken line, because these truths that are in here, and I mean, there are like the law of the principle of duality, the principle of the polarity, the principle of periodicity, the principle of cause and effect, of correspondence, of the principle of compensation or karma. These are not made up by any human beings, and they're not new. They're ancient, and so the more recent discussions of this, and incidentally, there was another group of perennial philosophers that was even more recent than Blavatsky. In the mid 20th century, there was a fellow in Boston named Ananda Coomaraswamy, and then a Frenchman named René Guénon, and then a third guy named Fritjof Schuon, that started this group called the traditionalists. So they all have different names, but the principles are identical throughout. So it's just a movement that, and in the future there will be new restatements of these facts, because the language will change and the culture will change, and 500 years from now, who knows where we're going to be, but those truths will be there. So I would say glom on to that line of truth, and whether you want to study Pythagoras or Lao Tzu or Ramana Maharshi or any of these, they're all using different metaphors and different language to describe the same principles. And then once you get a hold of that line of truth, which is immemorial and immutable, it doesn't change, then you're on the right track, right? And then you can study and meditate and do, you eat a plant-based diet and do all these wonderful
do the whole thing. Yeah. You really enlightened me today.
Exactly. Right.
I love it. I love it. If people want to contact you, how do they find you?
Geez.
Do you
I
have a
don't know.
website or
No,
no?
I am a social media Luddite.
I love it.
I don't have any Facebooks or Insta chats or any of that business.
All right. Well, if you guys have a question, you can send it to me and I'll get it.
Okay. That'll work.
Okay. Is that cool?
Right.
Well, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. You guys, it's called The Higher Spiritual Path. It's by Wilson Quinn. This is what the book looks like. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show, honestly, Bill.
Thank you, Nancy. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. All right, you guys, if you want an angel reading, go to my website, nancyyearout.com. I did just download a message from Archangel Gabriel. You can check it out. It's actually on my YouTube channel. You can check that out too. Everyone have a fabulous weekend. Blessings to all, and take care.